Welcome to So You Want to Be an Ally. We share our stories
and our insights on non-Black allyship to Black women.
My name is Darlene. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I help parents advocate for their Black and brown kids' emotional and racial identity development needs. And that's because our kids deserve the opportunity to grow, learn, strive, and thrive.
My name is Olanike. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And my life experience led me to becoming an advocate for equity in the workplace, which led me to starting a consulting business where I help workplaces who want to do better. Want to be an ally? Gather round
and listen up. So, welcome back, allies, to So You Want to Be an Ally. It's 2021, and Kay and I are back at it. We're sharing our experiences as Black women. And in this particular case, we're going to be talking about being Black mothers. So after laying the foundation for allyship in our first 6 episodes, we are back with new content inspired by our previous conversations about parenting. So if you've listened to or you've been around, you've heard the Mama Bear story from Nikkei, which is always funny. And you've heard my little tag, a whole Black son, right? If you haven't, we got some guidance for you, Nikkei. Tell them how to
go back.
Yeah.
So this next series we're kicking off is called Tools for Allyship. And if this is your first time joining us, it is a good place to jump in. We share our stories, we place them in context, we share our takeaways with you. Like Darlene just said, go back and listen to the previous episodes. You will hear us reference stories from before. And a nice place to start would be our recap episode that we released on our last Wannabe Wednesday, about two Wednesdays ago. Let's jump in with the question of the day.
All right. So, question of the day. What are the challenges Black mothers face raising Black children? So I had to answer that since I'm going to be the first one to take a stab at it this episode. I would say it's pretty much a balancing act to parent while Black, right? Because you're Black in your parenting. So we know being Black in America is a lot in itself. But now that I have the responsibility of another life in my hand, it's this whole dynamic of not only preparing this little person, this little individual that I'm responsible for, but the raising aspect of it is like real complex. So I told you all before that I do parenting coaching on the side through Parent Zone. That's parentzonellc.com. And there are 4 significant areas of parenting that really stand out to me that I highlight a lot. And these are typical parent concerns. So these aren't like some random things that, you're not going to hear these weird dynamics. You're going to hear like stuff that we constantly think about, but we don't necessarily use this language. So from the Parent Zone perspective, the 4 areas are safety, security, structure, and support. So when I think about safety, I think about emotional safety. So there's a lot of emotionality that comes with parenting little people. We know it. We see it from the tantrums to the crying to the vulnerability, right? We're constantly navigating and trying to strike this balance on how do we grant them access to their emotions in a healthy way, right? While also giving them the language to learn how to express their emotions in a healthy way. Right. One of the things that was absolutely important to me, having a Black son, was that my son could have a healthy emotional existence. Because we know that not only just in misogyny and just living in this patriarchy, that emotionality from a male perspective is very restricted. Now, being a mental health professional, I know that I've seen it take its toll on Black men, on men in general, but specifically in the Black community. So with me having a Black son, I was like, I'm going to give my son the tools that he needs. So for me, that's what it means to have safety. It is very important for a child to have emotional safety for growth, for risk taking, but also to lay that foundation for them growing older. Security was more of a physical premise, right? So, we think about what it means for them to exist out on the playground, to exist out in spaces. So this is very much a behavioral perspective. So we're thinking about how do we set up an environment that allows them, because, at certain ages, they test a lot of boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know,
I wonder what would happen if I stuck this knife in the socket.
Absolutely, right?
What would happen if I eat this soap, which my daughter did. She
Lord
ate
Jesus.
soap and told me about it at the age of
Jesus.
13, way later.
Wait, right? No, you're good. I think those stories are funny because it's important to think about it. But from a Black mom's perspective, I think also about security in this world.
Yes.
Right. So that's the other layer. So that's where the preparation comes in. So that's kind of the stuff that we're going to talk about, that you'll hear in our stories that we'll share a little bit later. And then you have the structure, right? So this again goes into, we talked a little bit about a boundary setting so from a structural perspective, how do I combine this emotional and physical safety and create a system for my child that promotes that risk taking? Because we know that risk taking is very, very important for their learning and development. That's where exposure comes in. It becomes super, super important for us as a function of parenting and raising and preparing our kids to provide a system for them. And then lastly, we have that support. And support both is from an interpersonal perspective and a social perspective for our kids, as well as a self-care perspective for us, right? Mm-hmm. So we're thinking about the interpersonal and social support that families provide, that the interpersonal interaction, the social development that comes with, raising a child, like you want all those things to be present. And what's also extremely important, which is why I do parenting coaching, is this ability that we have to take care of ourselves. It's the whole dynamic with they tell you with the mask on the plane, right? You got to cover your own mouth to breathe before you can take care of your child. So it's the combination of that really stands out with support. So that's those four significant areas you're going to see come up in our framing and the sharing of our stories as we move forward through this entire series on parenting.
This is good because, as you were talking about this, I could think about the regular parenting stuff that I do, and I could think about the stuff that it has a greater weight because I'm a Black woman raising a Black child. So
it's heavy, huh?
It is. We have witnessed these prejudiced and biased behaviors directed at our kids firsthand by adults and by other kids, and by systems too. I would even add that there's a difference between in the individual level and the systemic level or an institutional level, which is a very important distinction. So we're going to be sharing some of those stories with you today. Some of these stories are stories that are, still bring up emotion for us because we're still raising these children, and there's still stuff we got to keep continuing to do. And so some of them are stories that we were there and witnessed ourselves. Some of them are things that our children just came back and relate to us. So they're literally from them, from the mouth of babes, as you put it earlier, Darlene. So we're excited to share stories of our kids making us proud, advocating for themselves in small to big ways, and also stories of young allies who showed up for them, who showed up and said, hey, that's not okay, or just supported them, or went and like maybe told an adult in the scenario what was going on, even when maybe the kid themselves didn't. So those stories will serve as an example that it's never too early to train up an ally in the way that they should go.
And on top of that, one of the things that I want to add the context, as we talk about race, as we talk about racism, as we talk about biases, one of the things that tends to happen when we talk about young people is you often hear people having dialogue about, racism in that age range. Can children be racist, right? And so my answer to that would be, especially as we go through these earlier stages in life, my answer to that is, I don't think children are racist. I think what happens is they act out and they carry forward the beliefs that they're modeling and that are instilled in them and that they experience at a certain age, at an early age. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what those experiences look like early on, because in reality, those children do grow up to become adults. And so one of the things that Harley has ever discussed that I think our stories will reflect is what happens when we're navigating these spaces and we're helping our children navigate these spaces, and the conversations that we notice amongst the kids, from us dealing with the parents of the other kids, or us dealing with other adults in the lives of the kids, and what the children are actually telling us. What are your thoughts about that, Nikay? What are your thoughts about are children racist? Did I put you on spot? That's a tough one.
It's okay. It's a tough one because I'm going, I tend to think about it and talk about racism more so because of what my professional, like my work context, the consulting and all of that. I think about it from a systems perspective. Fair enough. First. So when I think about it from a systems perspective, from a historical perspective, then it's an automatic yes.
Absolutely.
We all are. We just got to figure out where we are on the spectrum. But at the same time, right, when I then go back to like that individual level, all children basically become a product of their environment.
Absolutely.
But so there is something to it. I mean, like as you stated, when they come into the world, they're fresh.
Yep.
But within a few months, when they start to develop as humans, preferences start to take shape. And at that point, if we were in a non-racist, if we were in like a completely free, society, if racism wasn't a thing, then, I don't know that I would say that the kid is racist. There would just be whatever is present in the water.
Correct.
Because we come out with these human tendencies. That's just biology. And by the time we get old enough to start having preferences and make choices and start making calls about where's safer and where's less risk or more risk, we're going to fall in line with whatever's already in the water.
Yep.
So coming out of the womb, I think I would agree. Yes. Coming out of the womb, they're just a baby. They're just fresh, pure. It hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
We very quickly taint the poor babies.
Absolutely. And that is where the systems, so what Nikay shared was the systemic perspective, the systemic lens. What I shared is a developmental lens. And the beauty about what we just talked about is that they are not separate from each other. Because Nikay, you hit the nail on the head. There is a point up to which children function in the way that children do. They model, they're sponges, they take things in, and they just do what they see. So they say what they see. So when a kindergarten says, "Oh, your skin is the color of poo," they just simply shared what they've heard in their developmentally appropriate language, what they've observed or heard from their environment. So that is the thing, right? And so I like, and I think it was good to ask you that question because I like the presence of both of those in this podcast for us to move forward and share our stories, because we do break it down and we do start talking about the systems and what's influencing our kids and how we then have to navigate the system while also individually dealing with our children developmentally where they are. So thank you for offering that. And I think it's very important for our listeners to understand that this is not an either or. Both things are true and both things are present. And I think one of the gifts we'll give you all later is a very specific episode on the developmental stages and us walking you through like what you can expect at each stage of a child's development, because it's out there and it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
All right. So because of that, giving that premise, right, we are going to pull you along with us down this journey, down this path of incidents. We're going to talk about our parenting approaches, like what we did and why we did it. And then we're going to, tell you a little about the things that we had to think about from the developmental lens of working with our kids at the given ages that they were.
Yeah.
So I guess I would like to start with my story, if that's okay, Nikay.
Yeah.
Because ironically, right? So we know that there are developmental stages leading all the way up to from infancy to the elderly phase. But for us, we're going to start at Chris in I forgot what, he was in first to third grade is the area we're starting, right? So this is what I call youth, the youth phase. And in this particular story, I started to notice. So my son is very chocolate. And so early on, when I realized that I was going to have a Black son, and I'm very aware of my complexion, and his dad is fairly dark as well, I knew I was going to have a nice little chocolate thing. So like in my mind, and I tell Chris this all the time, so this is nothing against Chris. Like I knew I was going to have, you know that picture of the little Black little girl with the puffs? Right? And she always has this cute round chocolate face. Like that's what I knew I was gonna have. I knew I was gonna have Afro puff little chocolate girl, but I got Chris. He's cool. He's cute too, right? He's real cute. He's my baby, but I just knew I was gonna have this little chocolate girl. But anyway, so I ended up with Chris. Just kidding, baby. I love you. And I noticed even early on, as we were talking about all that stuff that happens leading up to it, this was, I think, the first time where I had to get real intentional. Like it wasn't just preparing him for the world. I had to like really start being intentional about raising him and his unlearning of some things. So Chris he got his first like game system early. This is at the time like the GameCube was out, and so he had that. And if you remember anything about the GameCube, if you don't, your kid's not a gamer, this is what happens. So with most of the games, especially nowadays, you get to create an avatar. And I started to notice that all of Chris's avatars look nothing like him, either by complexion wise, by texture of hair, by the color of the hair. It was always either blonde or light brown. It was always some mohawk thing, right? It was never curly. Now, mind you, put this in context. The interesting thing about that was oftentimes he had nothing to choose from. Isn't that interesting?
Right. So systems, institutions.
You see what I'm saying? This is why both of these things matter. Oftentimes we would have to have a legitimate conversation about like, okay, because at one point I said to him, this is my 6-7-year-old son, Chris, I will not allow another avatar in your game that does not look anything like you or anybody that's close to you. So we weren't doing the blonde hair, blue eye kid. We weren't doing the light complected avatar. And for those of you who are saying, well, wow, that's very specific, or wow, you're being racist. Let me tell you what it means to be a Black mother of a dark chocolate child. There's a lot of messaging that my son clearly had to receive for him to prefer, right, quote unquote, prefer to make all his avatars look nothing like him. That says a lot about what he is internalizing and what he is reflecting. And this is why we say representation matters. He, as a child at this age, is completely unaware of the influence of the Disney cartoons, the PBS cartoons. Now, mind you, my son was watching, it was this coding cartoon on PBS that I loved. And he would watch it. We would get up every morning and watch that. He would watch, because he's always been a STEM kid. So he would all the time watch anything that had to do with STEM. At some point, he wanted to do aviation engineering. Now he's into music production engineering. But, so exposure. This is what it means as parenting. This is just generic parenting. Exposure. Except as a Black parent, I have to go above and beyond because the representation for my son was absent. So now I had to go find it. Right. And so it was so interesting for me. And that is like when the light bulb went off. Now, my psychology background, everybody's heard of the doll study where kids as early as, and this is where it stems from. Not,
I need you to go Google it. And they did it like back in the 70s or something. And they've done it again.
They replicated it. And it is
Let me tell you something. It is heartbreaking.
It is. And it continues to this day. It is the Mamie and Kenneth Clark doll study. And basically what it boils down to, at least from how this applies to this example, is the positive evaluation of whiteness or non-Blackness as it relates to your quote unquote preferences. Now, this doll was things that, kids play with dolls.
Yeah.
Which is why there's always this uproar for Black dolls in stores. Why does this matter at this age? This is why. Because what you don't know is that these children are internalizing these images. And the beauty of this conversation is this is the exact same thing that's happening to white kids. The white kids are internalizing that, yes, that they are the priority. So they are the positivity.
Exactly. When they go see 10 different white options.
Absolutely.
I can be a white person with a mohawk. I can be white person with dark hair. I can be a white person with lighter color hair. I can be with red. Like there's options. There's variety. Yep. And there's literally, from what you're telling us, zero Black representation in some of these games. And even if there is, I bet there's not a variety. I bet there's not different shades, different. At that time it was horrible. Back then,
we've since gotten better, but even then, there's still some limitations. So even now, when you're looking at games, you don't see them capturing the complexions, right? Like, yes, Blackness is not a monolith, so you don't see complexions. You don't see
the variety.
And nose shapes. You don't see eye shapes, hair textures. They're getting there, right? You might get a fade, which is great because it wasn't there before. But no, seriously. But this is the thing.
Improvement. I was watching this Marvel documentary about when they started to introduce Black superheroes into the comics, and they literally were like, "What color do we literally use to print this out on paper?" It was a conundrum. I think. What color did they? I think they used some kind of green or something. It was bizarre, right? So. It was either like actual Black or green or something that I got to that part and I was like, oh my gosh, I almost wanted to record it. Like, this is going to be part of some workshop, training, facilitation, something someday. Cause and the thing is, they were actually very progressive to hear this documentary tell it, and that they were actually introducing Black characters. Yes. This is where they introduced Black Panther and, I think Luke Cage maybe was also a Marvel character. So they were actually introducing Black characters at a time where nobody was. It was not the thing to do. It was, but then it was like the system wasn't set up to actually do it again. Wow. The thing too is, when you were saying, somebody might be listening to this and going, that's harsh. Why is it about skin color? Why is it about race? Why is it about all of that? And you talked about the internalization that's happening for Black kids, but also for non-Black kids as well. And particularly for white kids, because non-Black kids, in many of these cases, also don't see themselves represented. And what really strikes me here is that because of the facts of the context in our society, the history, the status quo, whiteness, which was made up. If you want to learn about that, go look up my TEDx talk. I talk about that. Whiteness was created for a purpose, right? Yes. So you're not really white. You're like Irish or Polish or Italian or whatever. Yep. You have an ethnicity, and that was stripped away, or not really. They couldn't really strip it away from families that decided to retain their culture.
They definitely condensed it down, right?
But it was like you were invited into whiteness at some point, different Europeans, and whiteness has been centered and bolstered and prioritized and advantaged over time. This is not an opinion, this is fact. So when we then get to the place where we're talking about, variety and diversity with avatars and with dolls and everything else, whiteness and the way that whiteness has been instilled in all of us in this country gets threatened. And you start to say things like, well, that's racist. Why would you be focusing on color for avatars or whatever? And you're centering yourself even in that response, because guess what? It's actually about Chris. It's actually about the child and them being able to recognize their worth and their value despite of the discentering and the marginalization, that's where these terms come from, that is constantly happening when they see or don't see themselves represented in different ways. So, you know, I hope for those that are listening and maybe hearing these concepts and these ideas for the first time, that you recognize that half of the battle is just not centering yourself. Like, just take a beat. It's actually not about you. It's going to feel like it's about you because we're saying white, 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 white. But that's only because this is the society we live in is white, 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 white. Right. So in order to talk about the thing that is crushing our, you know, advancement or, you know, harming us or our children in some way, we have to be able to name whiteness. And we need y'all to get over that. It's not a personal attack. It really isn't.
It's a thing. It's a real thing.
It's a thing. Whiteness was created and it's a thing. It functions. And when you're not aware of it, you're kind of complicit with all the evil things that it does. But when, oh yeah, man, I love me some white people that can name whiteness and just be like,
Look at you. Look at your face. You're so happy.
It is like, oh my God.
I can't see your face, but she's so happy.
You get it. You have to divest from whiteness, y'all. I am on a sidebar. Let's pull back.
But to that point, so let's take that, what you just described, and let's anchor it back into parenting, because that feeling that you just described is exactly what I'm trying to instill in my chocolate little boy. Because the messaging that he will receive is a different pieces of that. Now, of course, gender plays a huge role, because Black boys and Black men and Black girls and Black women, two different worlds. So there he will receive some messaging about being in awe, because they just love Black men. Oh my God. And he's so chocolate with his chocolate self, and he gonna be tall, and he real handsome, you know, and he got his little swag, so he gonna be fine. Except he got to get there, because that won't exist if I'm not aware as a mother. Right. To try to help him strike his balance. Because this is where, as you spoke to the social piece, right, the systemic piece, I'm going to take us back to the developmental piece. At the age of 6, children can and do describe their worth, happiness, and wealth in concrete terms, basically what they see. So if I am trying to instill in my child worth, just as you said before, Chris is the center of this. And so for all the people who want to say, oh, you're being racist, no, I am centering my child. This is what it means to be a Black parent. I have to center my child's development, because there are external forces that are just gradually ciphering things out of him that he's unaware of, that now that I'm aware of, I got to put it back in there.
Right.
And so they see themselves as a member of a racial group at this age. This is all kids. This is generally all kids. So because I'm aware of this, I have this awareness, it is important for me to nurture this. Do I not nurture his cognitive abilities, his academic abilities? Do I not nurture his social development? Then it is my responsibility to nurture his racial development. The thing that differs between me and a white parent, and I've had this conversation with a woman that I did my practicum with, is that there is the society is doing y'all work for y'all.
Yes.
Y'all turn on the TV. Like, here you go, baby girl. Here, take this iPad. They're doing now. Does that take away from correctiveness based on your own personal values and that kind of thing? Absolutely not. But I'm just telling you that I have this added piece of promoting this social, ethnic, racial, cultural aspect of his development that I have to be mindful of. That not that you're not mindful of as a white parent, but you're getting a lot more support from society than I ever will. It's actually going in the opposite direction. So for that reason, that's just like a whole thing, right? And so that's why the parenting, that's the way I parent. That's why I parent. And from my son's perspective, you know, I'm going to go ahead and put it out on a limb and say, you know, in the moment, he was annoyed. He still gets annoyed when I go on my rants. I will always go on my rants about his racial identity and his ethnic development because of the world that he exists in. But he's prepared for them now. And so now, but I'll tell you, if you talk to him about it, he knows. And that's what I'm proud of. Is it uncomfortable? Is it weird? Is it odd? Absolutely. But my son knows who he is. And when you see him, he's a little awkward because he's growing into his body, but it ain't because he's uncertain about his Blackness. I'll tell you that. So that's
yes.
my 2 cents.
Yes. The representation thing is really striking me because from a young age, I was very mindful with whatever dolls. And so was my family. Like, you know, Jola's Nana got her brown dolls. And Jola wasn't really a doll kid. I mean, she had a few along the years, but she wasn't a kid that was very much into like just getting all the dolls. But the dolls she did have were brown, brown skin dolls. That was important. The books that she had
absolutely
centered Black children.
Absolutely.
That was important. And she had just stories that were just any story that, you know, it wasn't like necessarily a Black, you know, experience story, but she also had books that centered the Black experience.
Absolutely.
One of those things, I think similar to what you described, like when you realized that you were having a Black son, it was like, okay, this is the lane I'm on. These are the things that I need to, that are very specific to the experience of a Black boy. That happened for me for a Black girl. Like I was like, okay, I'm having a girl. All right, we gotta start talking. I gotta think about hair. Like hair was one specific thing that I was like, all right, here we go. You are gonna love your hair. You are gonna love it, and no one will be ever able to tell you nothing. Okay. And so from very little, she wasn't one or two. And I wasn't talking about, you know, love your hair because you're not going to see it represented. And, you know, you have to love your hair and because people are going to make fun of it. Like that wasn't appropriate developmentally. What she heard from me at 2, 3, 4, 5 is, oh, I love your hair so much. Your hair is so beautiful. Let me do your hair. Oh, I love your hair. This is how we do it. So why do you use this, mommy? Oh, we use conditioner, you know, to make it malleable. Like, you know, isn't it amazing? I used to tell her hair was magical. Yeah.
I say that to my nieces. I tell them it grows towards the sun.
So many things. It is so cool. Like you can braid it, you can lock it, it can be straight, it can be short. Isn't it amazing how it's straight and then you wash it and then it just wrinkles up? Oh, that's so like these are the conversations that we're having just as she's growing up. Right. And so we're not talking about what society is messaging or not messaging to her. We're intentionally building that in and weaving that into her, the way that she thinks about herself. So that by the time that this is actually not the story I planned to tell, but it just kind of flowed from our conversation. By the time she got to the first school that she attended, where she was in the racial minority. So the first schools that Jola attended, kindergarten was different. And then the first school, it was predominantly Black. So there weren't any overt, you know, racial incidents that ever even rose to the top of conversation or me having to intervene or be aware of anything like that, right? Let me tell you something. When we came to come visit her school, when we moved to Charlotte, we were on the visit. We got out of the car in the parking lot and the kids were outside playing. She was in the 2nd grade. We literally got out of the car and she said, oh, and I hadn't told, she didn't know nothing about the school. Oh, mommy, everybody's white. Like it just came out of her mouth. It was just like, she just noticed it. And it was so striking from where she was coming from that she was like, oh, what? Right? And I was like, yeah, baby girl. Yeah, the school is, you know, mostly white children. She was like, oh. So we went through the visit. That was it. No other commentary, no conversation at that point. Trust me, there were many more conversations to come later on. So anyway, we ended up visiting or whatever. She got to the first week of school. In the first week of school, it must have been like, I don't know, like the 2nd or 3rd day. I get a call from the school. Something has happened at the school. My heart dropped. I was like, what is going on? There was an incident at the school where she was at lunch with the other kids, and a white boy started making fun of her hair. And she actually advocated for herself. So this is a story where, because of the groundwork that we had put in, she was at a point where she was like, so two things happened. One, she didn't even center the hair because in her mind, it wasn't normal. Even in her psyche that I need to even defend myself because you said something about my hair. Girl, boy,
because my hair is amazing.
No, my hair is amazing. My hair is magical, son. You don't know this, but that's fine. What she thought, what she recognized was this kid is being mean and rude to me, and I need to go tell an adult because he's just not being nice, right? So, but the thing that was happening in the center of that, the attack was her hair. So fortification, right?
Beautiful.
That I had put in.
Yes.
I was just like,
yes.
Oh, can you imagine a different kid?
Yes.
Right? Who maybe hadn't been an intentional part of the parenting approach to build that up in your child, right? And to be honest with you, even with all the fortification, we still get messages.
Yep.
I remember being in middle school and wishing that I had different hair, you know? So even on the continent of Africa, that messaging of straight hair is, you know, like it's everywhere. So it's hard to escape that, right? So I was so proud of her for advocating for herself. Scenario. Now, what was interesting is the school staff made the boy apologize. You know, they go through their process, and I think the boy wrote a letter of apology to Jola that she had to read. What was interesting, and the parents of the boy was also notified. And I really thought I was going to get a call from the other parent. I don't know. I was like, oh that's
you're so hopeful. You're so hopeful.
Okay. I thought I would get a call or an email like, oh, we heard that so-and-so happened. Never came. Never got a call. And I was like, So that was also my first experience because again, this was the first week at the school. Again, where I'm interacting with predominantly white parents, very different from my previous school. Now, mind you, I was very active in the previous school on the board of trustees and the PTA as I came to be also at this new school. But the parenting dynamics, that's a whole nother episode.
And you have to add that this was a private school?
It was a private school.
Right. So all of those dynamics matter, right? Because you know, what we're talking about here is how race intersects with socioeconomic status, right? Take that and put that in the context of education and access and resources and that kind of thing. So as you said before, like, as we talk about this stuff, as you'll see, like this stuff starts to branch off into so many other aspects of our world that we can just have individual we could just keep having podcast series.
Keep going.
But one of the things to kind of bring it around to what we were talking about is you gave the incident, you gave the fortification and how you processed and how you dealt with it. But I think what's really interesting about your story is the concept that Jola had, like her ability to kind of really be anchored in what's going on and respond in a way that's effective, right? Where it was like, I see that this is maltreatment and, you know, I'm going to go and do something about it. Because what you didn't say was for the children who don't have that foundation, you know, it gets internalized. And then they're crying. And then this is what racial bullying looks like, right? From a general perspective of parenting, we know how to deal with bullying. We talk about bullying. But ironically, I don't hear any specification around racial bullying, right? And so if we're talking about preparing young allies and we're talking about growing young allies and highlighting the works of young allies, you know, this is what we're talking about, how to really prepare kids. Because we say, well, teach your kids how to speak up about bullying, but isn't that the same with racism and racial?
Are we telling them to be allies? It's bystander intervention, really, right? Allyship. When you move from just, I support you in my heart, to I'm going to do something and stand up and speak up and show up and actually follow through with action. many times those opportunities are opportunities to react or intervene when something is happening in your presence. And so there's lots of trainings now that are out there about bystander intervention. When we then put this, in the context of children, and we're asking kids to intervene when somebody is being bullied, it's the same sort of idea.
Very much so. Very much so. And for them to have the awareness of it, right? And so your story obviously was the work that you put into preparing Joa to advocate for herself. Mm-hmm. But to add to that, from the perspective of the allies, like this is a great way to teach your child how to step in, if she had a friend sitting there, hey, leave Joa alone. You don't even have to go into correcting his behavior, but just like step in and say, you're just messing with her for this reason, and really, giving them the tools to communicate that and support that.
I mean, and she was so new then, she didn't have any friends yet.
Yep.
So thank goodness she had it in her to advocate for herself, because there's a scenario where that story plays out and she doesn't advocate for herself, and I never hear about it. And I don't even know that's happening. Yep. And perhaps that kid is then emboldened to continue to take little digs at her. Yep. Because nothing happened. And so this is just playing out. He's saying little things or what have you, because he's getting away with it and she's not reporting it. And all of a sudden, it starts to chip away at her confidence, at her self-esteem, and so on and so forth. So, the other side of it is when I kind of zoom out of this personal story and zoom out to systems level, is this is also a school that did not have many Black kids. There were two classes of her grade, and the only other Black girl was in the other class. So she literally did not have another Black girl in her classroom. So for somebody to even have understood what that experience was and be like, hey, not only is this mean, I can intervene, but this is also not cool to be, making fun of her for her hair. There's hey, that's not nice. This is a new girl in our school level. And then there's the extra additional level of, and why are you making fun of her hair? Like, there wasn't anyone like her in terms of a Black end girl to even be present in that institution in that scenario to catch it. And I'm not even going to go to the teacher level. That's a whole nother level.
Yeah, we don't have time. We don't have time.
We don't have all the time in the world. We got to do this in a reasonable time frame.
Yes, because we could keep talking, right? Like we could seriously keep talking.
Yeah. So this story about the hair story, I've told this before in other conversations, is layered, but it doesn't have that ally component. However, I do have a different scenario where so many Black moms or Black children have had to deal with the "your skin is the color of poop" story. It's
Lord Jesus.
We're going to have to cut it there on that cliffhanger, but join us for the next episode. We're going to continue that story. We're going to share more stories, and we're going to give you some things to consider as you raise children to be allies and to be advocates for themselves.
All right, folks, we're going to end it there for now. We want to make sure we hear from you, so send us a note or your thoughts on the question of the day. And if you want to speak to us on a topic, send it our way. You can find us on our social media platform at wannabeanally, or email us at wannabeanally@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to So You Want to Be an Ally wherever you get your personal podcasts.
You can find me, Olanike, at my website, www.mosaicforequity.com. That's Mosaic, MOSAIC, 4 as in the digit 4, equity, EQUITY. Follow me on Facebook and on LinkedIn at Mosaic for Equity. You can find me with that handle, and on Instagram as well.
You can find me, Darlene, at my website, www.parentzonellc.com. And follow me on Facebook at Donnie Davis, that's DAUNI, and Parent Zone LLC. And on Instagram at PZ Parenting Coaching. All right, we're out.
Bye.
See you later.